So the Canadian government have launched their first home saving account officially April 1st of this year. So which means today, if you want to, you can go out there and open an account right now. Now, this is an absolutely insane tax account that everybody should pay attention to. Now, the title of first home saving account is a little bit misleading. It's not just for people buying their first home. Here are the main three groups of people that should definitely finish the video. If you don't own a home and you intend to buy one in the future, if you don't own a home but you don't want to buy one in the future. And the last group is if you bought a home already but you have turned it into a rental or you have never moved in, you can actually still use this account. So for this video, I'm going to give you a quick crash course on how this works and what are some strategies that you should implement so it can give you a massive advantage going forward. So first of all, let's talk about why this is such a good account to have. Starting this year, you can put in $8,000 per year into this account for a maximum of $40,000 over 5 years. All growth inside will be tax shelter while it's inside, and eventually when you draw it back out for your first home, you can draw everything inside tax-free, and you also don't need to repay this over 15 years, unlike an RSP home buyer plan. Now, what if you don't want to use it for a home? That's also okay as well. This account can last for 15 years max, and at the end of 15 years, you have a choice to roll this over to your RSP regardless if you have RSP room or not. So you can continue to keep investing tax shelter or tax free until you withdraw it later from your RSP. So you can see this is an absolutely insane account. They basically took the best of a RSP and a TFSA combined together with no weaknesses and then just add more steroid on top to make this a super great saving account. So this is why no matter if you want to buy a home or not, you should definitely consider opening one as long as you're eligible to do so. Alright, so let's move on to the next part and talk about who can open this account. And this is where the first home, this title, is a little bit tricky and misleading. Now, really, there's only three criteria. Gonna be over 18, gonna be resident of Canada, and you're gonna be considered as a first-time home buyer. And this is very tricky. So what is first-time home buyer? It's not necessarily someone who is buying their very first home. It is anyone who have not occupied any home that they have owned or their spouse have owned for the last 4 years. So what that means is if you have bought a home, you do own one, but for the last 4 years you have not lived inside that home and you've rented it out, you are still considered as a first-time home buyer. Same with anyone who just became common law or marry a spouse right now. That person has a home, but you have never moved in that home. You have never occupied it for the last 4 years. You are still considered as a first-time home owner. So next, let's talk about what you can invest inside. Basically, anything you can do with an RSP or TFSA, you can do the same thing in FHSA. However, the only two things you may not be able to do is consistently buying and selling stocks. You'll be counted as day trading, or you're doing options inside. Most of the options that are available, you can't do them inside FHSA. Now next, let's talk about contribution. Like I said, it's $8,000 per year, but if you have missed any single year and you want to make it up the next year, you can do so for 1 year only. So you cannot chase back and say, hey, I missed 5 years and here's 40K lump sum. Only 1 year of makeup. And unlike RSP, if you want to write off that year's income, it has to count from January to December of that year. You have to buy it in that time, not March to March. So keep that in mind. However, just like an RSP, you can buy it first, but not use the tax deduction yet. If you see a higher income coming in the next years, you can save that and carry forward. Now, lastly, let's talk about transferring to another tax account if you do not intend to buy a home with this. So next, let's talk about what happens if you don't ever intend to draw this money out for your first home. Instead of just drawing it anyway and then paying full tax on this like an RSP, you should roll this over to an RSP or RIF. The most powerful thing about this is transferring to an RSP or RIF will not reduce your existing RSP room. So this is extremely powerful because basically the Canadian government just gave you an extra 40,000 of RSP room to use. The only thing you keep in mind is if you roll over, you do not get your FHSA room back. So be careful before you do this rollover. Now, if you want to do the opposite and put your RSP, roll this into a FHSA, you can also do the same thing. However, in this case, you will be limited by your FHSA room. And also with rollover, you do not get your RSP room back. So it's very rare for a RSP to make sense to roll over to an FHSA. It's usually only makes sense for FHSA going into an RSP. And the last two things that makes this account even better than everything you have heard so far is number one, you can use in conjunction with your RSP home buyer plan. So you could take 40K from your FHSA plus all the gains tax free, plus another 35,000 from your RSP home buyer plan easily. If you have maxed both accounts over 5 years plus some gains, you could easily come up with 100K of down payment for your first home. And second of all, this account has no income attribution. So what that means is you or your spouse can fill each other's account and you don't need to worry about that gain going back to the other spouse and having to pay tax on it. This is absolutely massive because when it comes to RSP, there is attribution, so you're going to be careful, but this account is very simple. Any spouse can fill each other's account, making this whole thing super easy to fund. Now, before we talk about strategy, understand that if you overfund this account, any amount that is overfunded by the limit is going to charge you 1% penalty per month. Even if you're over for 1 day, it still counts as 1 whole month, so just be careful on that. And finally, let's talk about strategy. Who should be using this account and how you should be using it. So if you are thinking about buying your first home, here's what I would definitely do. Open this account as soon as possible and start working towards the $8,000 limit for this year. You can either do monthly or do a lump sum, it doesn't matter. If you have to stop your RSP payment to fund this account to the full amount for this year, then just stop it. This account should take priority over your RSP and also over your TFSA. So if you're thinking about using an RSP home buyer plan as well, here would be my priority. Try to max FHSA to $8,000 for this year. Put the rest towards your RSP up to $35,000 total. The rest can go into TFSA. However, if you do not intend to buy a home, you should still open this account, and I would still prioritize this account first for the full $8,000. Then you can start choosing between TFSA or RSP. Because if you think you're $8,000 into FHSA, which gives you a deduction, it's already enough to write off your tax for this year, then you want to do a TFSA for the remainder of the year. Now, my last tip is if you're a parent and you have kids over 18, you should definitely consider opening an account for them as well and help them fund this account to the max if you can. Because the fact this account can be open for 15 years, your kid is at least going to be 33 years old by the time this account reaches its lifespan. And your kids should be ready for their first home around that age, so it will be perfect to take the whole thing out. It could be a massive down payment by then, depending on what you're investing in. But if they cannot decide or they're not ready by then, they can also just roll it over their RSP and continue to invest and then maybe just rely on the RSP home buyer plan. But yeah, this is a very quick crash course on how this account will work and who is eligible. My recommendation is anyone who's eligible, open this today and just start funding into this account. This account is super, super good. I wish I had this account when I was buying my first home or saving up for it. It's so good that I don't know if it's going to stick around for a long time. So while it's available, make sure you take advantage of this. Alright, if you like what you're hearing today, I do have a YouTube channel where I upload a lot of these topics on there and I go in very detail on different financial strategies that you can implement to help your financial wealth. So check out my YouTube there. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye!